Hello, everyone. I am Sean Finnegan. Welcome to a Rewind Theater for the Season 2 teaser trailer of Marvel's Daredevil. Very exciting stuff. I'm a big fan of Daredevil Season 1, so I wanted to walk you guys through this little sort of animation, motion graphic thing that they've got going on here and kind of point out to you some things that you may not have seen. So let's jump right in. We're in a church, and we're kind of doing some pans and tilts over artistic renderings of scenes that happened in Season 1. There's a lot of homages to sort of like Renaissance art here. Obviously, this very first frame is a reference to the creation of Adam by Michelangelo. But as you can see, the camera moves out, or actually it's a hard cut, and it's not the creation of Adam, but in fact, Matt Murdock, when he has his accident with sort of like the nuclear waste or whatever it is that gives him his sort of special gifts. This is the very first shot. And accompanying all of these shots is sort of like thematically relevant voiceover. This very first shot right here begins with Matt Murdock as a kid, kind of, you know, being sort of afraid that he's unable to see, and he's kind of like, he's winging out a little bit. As we move on to this next shot, it's actually pretty cool because these slow pans and tilts establish sort of the, like I said, thematic elements of it, of guilt and sort of Matt dealing with the consequences of living this dual life. This shot right here is from the episode Stick, where Matt Murdock is a kid who is coming to terms with being blind but living his life, and sort of gains the tutelage of Stick, who we know to be sort of this super hyper cool, very martial arts oriented trainer who is also himself blind. That is also very cool. Moving right along, we get another shot here of Matt as a grown-up, as an adult, where he is a practitioner of the law. And as we move on to that, we actually kind of see our first shot up here of him in that other side of the dual life, which is obviously as Daredevil. That shot right there where he's carrying the kid on the bottom of the screen there is from the very memorable hallway scene in Season 1, Episode 2, where he basically beats the crap out of like 15 different Russian dudes as he infiltrates like one of their hideouts and saves this kid from certain doom. And on the top of the frame here, we have him sort of bonding for the first time with Claire Temple, the nurse from the Hell's Kitchen hospital, who becomes kind of like a confidant for Matt Murdock, as well as obviously a main character in Season 1 of Daredevil. Accompanying this voiceover is really interesting because she says, lawyer by day, vigilante by night. How does that work? What's interesting is that, like, she's not exactly announced for Season 2, but obviously with being such a big part of Matt Murdock's life and being a big part of Season 1, I wouldn't expect... I would expect her to pop up in Season 2 of Daredevil, even if she isn't announced. And, probably... she appeared in Jessica Jones, and has it been, I believe, officially announced for Luke Cage. So to see her sort of like wrapped up in this universe of Hell's Kitchen and those sort of three Marvel shows that share the same universe, not exactly a stretch of the imagination there. Moving right along though, there you see a better shot of it. But let's move right along. This is where we hear Karen Page from who is Matt Murdock's and Foggy Nelson's secretary slash assistant slash sort of like I guess moral compass, you could call it, of the group there, of their sort of like lawyer practice. This is from, I believe, the very, very first episode when Karen Page is basically being framed for murder, and she walks back into her apartment and finds that this is her husband, and he's been stabbed a bunch of times and is bleeding all over the place, and you can see the knife there on the left of her hand. And she looks a little bit more surprised here than she did when we saw it actually happen in the show. But very memorable scene, and yeah, that's that. Here we get a shot of Wilson Fisk and Vanessa Mariana, who we presume will become Vanessa Fisk at some point in the future. And this one I really love just because of the frame. Like, it's very ultra widescreen, cinemascope-ish, very reminiscent of the type of art you might see in a church. It's pretty cool. Here we have this, like, again, sort of this metaphor for the duality of the life that Matt Murdock lives. We get a voiceover that's really interesting because Matt's in confession here, and he's talking with the priest, and he's asking about why he feels guilty and what guilt means. And obviously on the left here we see Matt Murdock, and we see on the right Wilson Fisk, and the priest is saying, like, just because another man is guilty or just because another man is evil does not make you good. It's really, really interesting stuff there. And moving right along, we get another voiceover change where we have Foggy saying, like, Matt, you betrayed me, you lied to me. And ever since we were kids, and you just don't know anymore. This is the scene where Foggy Nelson finds Matt Murdock like beat up and knocked out and totally unconscious, like in his apartment, and at that moment finds out that this whole time he's been living this dual life, and he feels understandably a little bit betrayed and a little bit like untrusted. Moving right along, though, I love the color palette of that too. Just as a side note, everything that's shot in Matt's apartment is very like colorful and neon. It's strange. Here we have sort of like the big setup for this long sort of dolly out shot where we're revealing all of the characters that were integral to season 1, starting with the main characters. Daredevil up there in the center, obviously Matt Murdock. Karen Page on the left, Foggy Nelson on the right. Sort of the, conflict right there in blue between Daredevil and Wilson Fisk. Battling Jack Murdock in the bottom right, who is Matt Murdock's father, the boxer. And the confrontation between Daredevil and the Red Ninja, who I forget his name. I'm sorry about that, but that's a really cool encounter too, who is also part of that drug ring who's running that... working with Fisk and a bunch of other sort of conspirators in season 1 that shapes the main conflict for season 1. As we dolly out, we get this really big wide shot establishing the characters, like all of the characters from season 1. You can obviously spot like Daredevil up there in the center underneath the DD logo. Karen Page, Foggy Nelson there on the left below Daredevil, Wilson Fisk and Vanessa Mariana on the right there. And as you go down, you see a bunch of the other characters from season 1. And this coincides a lot with the poster that they also revealed, in which it's a lot more clear and you can see a bunch of the characters there, as well as teases for Elektra. Her size are sitting in the bottom right on that poster. Here they're not exactly all that visible. And obviously Punisher, one of the main things that I don't know how people miss this, but like as you dolly out, it's quite obviously there's this like very ominous blackish skull kind of painted into the clouds there. Daredevil appears right in between his eyes and right on the forehead of the skull. You must have seen it by now, is the Daredevil logo, which is really, really cool. And at this point, we're getting a really cool voiceover that Wilson Fisk is saying, like, I respect your conviction, and Daredevil saying, like, I have to be the man this city needs. And it's basically setting up season 2 in the conflict while teasing some of the really cool elements that we know, like Punisher and Elektra, obviously. As we dolly out further and further, the image darkens a little bit, and we get this really cool shattering of glass and the church being shot up, which most people are reading as like a foreshadowing of the Punisher, although I'm not exactly sure why he would shoot up a church, but that remains to be seen. It's very, very cool, and the tone of it and sort of the themes that this establishes is very Daredevil, and even if we don't get a lot of new footage or a lot of new reveals, it's still really worth taking a look at. The last thing to really point out is that this sort of set up for the wall itself, like with Daredevil in the middle, and all of the sort of supporting characters of season 1 behind it. That is yet another homage to Michelangelo's The Last Judgment. I don't have the imagery here, so I can't really show it to you, but if you pull it up on the internet, if you Google Michelangelo's The Last Judgment, you will see that this is very much in that same style, albeit with a very different color palette, a more darker, ominous color palette, obviously, since that is the tone of Daredevil. It's very cool stuff. And lastly, we get a date, March 18th, 2016 worldwide, because Netflix doesn't release things theatrically and then do internet release later on. Everything is sort of day and date, which is really, really cool. I will be one of the people to binge watch basically the whole thing in a few days, as I'm sure a lot of you will as well. And there you have it, folks. That's been the Rewind Theater for the Season 2 teaser trailer of Marvel's Daredevil. I'm really looking forward to it, and I'm sure all of you are as well. For those hyper fans out there who spotted something maybe I didn't, be sure to leave it in the comments below. I love talking about that stuff with you. And for everything else, Daredevil, Netflix, and internet video, you are already in the right place. IGN.